Come with me if you want to list.
Folks, welcome to another edition in Real Estate Experts. As always, I'm your host, Glenn Twiddle, bringing you leading experts from around the country and around the world to help you traverse the minefield that is the real estate landscape, whether that's buying property for the lowest price to build a big property portfolio, being an investor, selling for top price in order to liquidate your investment and realize your return. Whatever it is, if it's got to do with the property industry, this show's got you covered. And today, there is no one else that exemplifies that industry more than Sarah Schultz. She's an author of a book on the subject of getting top dollar for property. She's a hired gun negotiator, but what really gives her the credentials to help us here on this show more than anyone is she's a historical serial property investor, renovator, flipper of her own properties multiple times. And those lessons that she learned in those days as a consumer, just like you, she now applies to her listing and selling and helping of other people duplicate the successes that she earned. So, Sarah Schultz, thanks for hanging out.
My pleasure.
I'm so stoked. Now, you've got to tell us about those days when kind of what you experienced as a consumer in this business and it's led you to be doing it. What were your days like when you were buying properties, renovating them yourselves and flipping them and all of that? Give us the quick version of your backstory, I suppose.
Well, I think personally you have to really enjoy doing that in order to do it. So that was one of the things. I'm always really loved real estate and I've always really loved properties. So in order to do it, you have to love it. And the first one was sort of by accident. So when we did it, we did such a good job of it, didn't realize we were going to do a good job of it, and for a really little amount of money, and made so much money, we went, oh, well, maybe we're okay at this, especially when other people sort of started making comments about it. So then we just continued to do it from there. And we definitely have learned a lot of things that can help you. So when I was doing it, what you can do to actually do small things that make a big difference. But then now since I've been in real estate, it's gone a next level because I can also sort of see what buyers want and what they don't want. So what are the important things to put the money into, and then what are the not important things? So you just want to have as big a market as you possibly can for your property. So in order to do that, there are things that you can do that help broaden the amount of buyers you got. The more buyers you got, the more likely you'll get a better price.
And you're still doing that now. I mean, I understand you and your partner just sold another one. So
yeah, we did.
You're still not only teaching it and sort of doing it as a consultant, but you're still in the game.
Yeah, and actually the buyers that bought that property were the most excited out of any house I've ever sold, and were like waving their arms around and like how much they loved the flow of the house and all the things we did. And it's really good. Like I was like trying not to be emotional, but I was like getting a little bit of a tear because I was like, okay, at least we did it right. Yeah. But yeah, you have to really enjoy it. And it is a little bit on hold at the moment, but it is a plan, you know, because I've started my own real estate business and I am only in really a year of doing it as an actual business on my own. Yes. I want to make sure that I've got my dedication into that, and then my husband can come in and we can start doing that again as a business within the business. So it will still be within Schultz Realty, but he'll be able to come in and do a little bit more of that. So it's definitely on our agenda to do more of it.
And you mentioned that some of those things that you do, because I love that you've got a reputation of you sell properties for your consulting clients, your clients where you're selling properties for other people, that you're selling them as if they were your own, and so your reputation is well deserved. You mentioned that it didn't cost, some of these subtle things that you do don't cost a lot of money. Talk to us about kind of what a seller who comes to you for advice can expect above and beyond just selling a property like a normal real estate agent would do.
Well, I even do it for people that are not necessarily selling right now. Like I've got a few people that will ring me up and say, look, we just want to refinance. What can we do that the banks can see that we've made change, you know, things like that. And I'm happy to go out and do it. It's not a problem. But it really depends on the property, but usually I'll walk room to room. Sometimes it could be that the actual property itself is actually quite good. It's just the way that they've put their furniture or the styling that they've got in the room, or decluttering, paring it back. Sometimes it is the lick of paint is just old fashioned. They might really like it. And sometimes it's tough. I have to be really tough, and people don't really like what you've got to say sometimes, but you've got to say it.
That
look,
hot pink
I
wall,
understand.
Glenn.
Yeah. Oh, but don't laugh. I've had some that have had one wall's purple, one wall's maroon, and I've had to go, look, I understand you really like that, but you have to look at what the broad people are going to like. While you're living it, have it whatever colours you want, but when you're about to pare it back and you're going to sell it, there are certain colours that are aesthetically good for every eye. That's what you want to have. And so things like that. And also like people look at a bathroom and they go, oh, well, it's going to cost $15,000 to renovate it. Well, no, there's actually ways that you can do it that are really, really affordable, but make a big impact and a big change. One that's just settling actually on Friday helped them with their bathroom, just some subtle changes, just changing the frame to frameless instead of the old, sort of shower screen, and just doing some fresh grout. Sometimes it's just a change of grout or just the actual, like there are things you can do to make an old bathroom look quite modern for very little money, but it doesn't matter because you're selling it. So it's really just enough to get that, across the line so that everyone likes it, but you don't have to put all your money in it because then you're not going to get it back.
Yeah. And is that the sort of thing you've covered in your book? Because I know you've
Yes.
sort of written that in a book. Tell us about putting that lifetime of property experience into a into a book that the consumers around the country could get, because not everyone lives in your neck of the woods down in Beenleigh. They can't all have you. So
Look, I think I've covered it mostly in the book, but like I'm always, even if they are in another place, I'm always there available on Facebook, my website, or even text, whatever, to answer if someone just wanted to even ask me the question. And sometimes I get that. I've had people in Ravenshoe, I don't even know where it is, asking me, oh, we want to sell, can you help us? I'm like, I can't really, because I can't come and do an open house, but what I'll do is I'll do some research and I'll try and find someone like-minded that I can refer you to, and then I'll look for someone.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
I'm guessing the Sarah Schultzes of every area, they were pretty hard to come by, because not many agents I know can boast, I've interviewed a lot of them, and not many can boast your level of practical in the field experience. So I suppose you just do your best to find someone comparable as close as you can get.
Yeah, I do the best that I can, but the thing is though, we were talking about the block last night. I'd still be frightened of going on the block, because whilst I think I still do a good job, I might go on that and they might be like, fail, last, so I'm only as good as, what I am doing, but at the same time, I know that there's money being made, so there must be something that I'm doing right.
Yeah, definitely. So now I get questions from my viewers on all sorts of matters real estate wise. So say someone doesn't live in your area, in the southern suburbs of Brisbane, where they can't have you.
Yep.
What sort of things would you be looking for our viewers that you might be looking for in a referral person? Say someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm selling in Sydney. How can our Sydney viewers, our Melbourne viewers, Perth, wherever the guys might be, find the Sarah Schultz of their area? What are some of the indicators that we can be looking for? Because they'll all say they're good.
That's
right?
what I was going to say.
They'll all say they're good.
Everyone's going to interview well.
So what are the tells that tell the ones who mean it and the ones who are just saying it?
Yeah. I think there's a few key things that I think more as to what to look out for than what to look for. So most people will probably interview well, but when they're showing you, say for example, what they've sold, make sure that's what they've sold. So I found going against other people, because I'm an independent brand, that someone that may work for a bigger brand is showing sales of a whole office.
The company sales.
And not their own. So that's important. You could be sitting with a brand new real estate that's not sold one thing, but is claiming to have sold 25. And I'm not saying that a brand new I was new at one point and people had to take a chance on me.
Yeah, someone's got to be the first heart surgeon patient.
Correct. But if they are saying one thing and then that's not the truth, well then that's a different story. Because if they're lying to you up front, what else is going to come through? That's my opinion.
So if it was a rookie, you'd say, you're my first listing?
I would. That's what I did.
Live and breathe your property.
That's what I did. That's how I got my first one. I just went in and went, look, this is my background. I've flipped, I've renovated, I've done all this. You're my first actual listing. And that was probably one of the few times where I did do a negotiated commission, because you're taking a chance on me, I'll return the favor.
Nice.
You can do that for the first few just to get across the line. But honesty, I think, is really important. Real estate has a bad name for being really dishonest. So I make a point of making sure I'm really honest all the time. So that's the key thing to look out for. If you have done any research before, see if you can trick them up, because you actually want to know that they're going to come back and be honest. And that's one of the key things I get told from people, is that I'm what they call as a WASI-wig. So what you see is what you get.
Okay.
Right? And that sometimes it doesn't always go across well, but they like it because it's real. So looking for someone real. What is their list to sell ratio? Because there's a lot of people out there that just want to have listings on their book for the sake of having a listing or to meet KPIs within their brand, and not really caring about what they're doing. So if they know they're up against others, they might buy your listing. So what that means is they'll overprice the listing because they'll think that they're going to make you believe that you're going to get this amazing price. They know they're going to get the listing, but they're going to put zero effort in it because they know it's not going to sell at that price. And then what they'll do is they'll work you down, and work you down. And then by the time you do get sold, you could have been sold in 3 days with a good agent for probably a better price if it was priced properly in the first place and you weren't bought the listing. So I think that's really, really key, is really kind of getting your own homework as well. Do your homework before they come, so that you know whether they're actually being real with you. So go through a few properties in the area, compare it and see what you think yours is going to be. You might be a little bit off because there could be some indicators that you're not aware of, but you'll get an idea. So then if they come in and you think it's around 450 and they're saying 500, you know they're full of BS.
They're trying the old real estate
they're full
trick.
of BS.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of put it back to them, you know. So I've heard people have sworn black and blue that I will get this price and then never got it, and people have sat on the market for a really, really long time. So I think the other key important things is communication. So they're going to sit with you and they're going to communicate well with you in the interview, but what are you going to do for me during the listing? So I make a point of finding out. So this is how I work. So if anything is happening on your listing, Glenn, I'm going to be in contact with you. So you're going to know this person's called about this. This is what I've done. Okay, that's my form of communication. Does that work for you? And you might say, no, I don't need to be contacted that often, Sarah. Just do it once a week. Or you might be someone like I had a client recently that wants to be texted morning and afternoon, even if there's nothing to talk about. So you need to find out what they need and that you're actually going to follow through with that, because that's really, really important.
And I've heard from feedback from consumers, you know, from the mums and dads out there, that the biggest concern and criticism they've got of our industry is lack of what you just said, lack of feedback and communication.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on, you know,
Yeah.
they're kept in the dark with our biggest asset.
See, the thing is, right, as a real estate agent, you have to think about the fact that, like, you might be holding 12 to 15 listings. So you're busy, right? You're out there, you're doing a lot. This person is sitting at home and all they're thinking about is their property. That's all that's on their mind.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went through it myself just recently, going through it again. And all you want to know is what's happening. Has someone even contacted you? Is the price right? Is the photos right? You know, are we presenting it right? When are we doing an open house? They want to know all that information. It's their prized possession. So you need to just make sure you're doing a good job of that.
Yeah.
And also following up on buyers. Make sure, do you follow up with buyers? When do you follow up with them? You know, what sort of system do you have in place? And I guess the other thing is also databases. So I am a strong believer that you can sell a property anywhere. Like, I've been referred to up to 45 minutes away and I've still sold a house in 14 days. If you do your research and you know the area, you can do that. But I do believe that it's really important that you really try to make sure that they know what they're doing as far as like that area goes, and you know they've done that research if it is like outside the area. So they've got to prove that to you. So sometimes it might even be getting a friend to go to one of their open houses and seeing how they actually do within an open house, how they treat that person. Do they follow them up? Because you should be following up after an open house, whether it's a text the following day and a phone call on the Monday, or both, or all of the above. You know what I mean? You need to know that they're doing that.
Well, leaving no stone unturned.
I think the percentage is something like 30% only actually call people back. There's 70% of buyers that go. I even have some buyers that come through and go, oh, to register? I've never had to register at another property. Like, how would you know to call someone back if you're not registering them through the property?
Wow.
So yeah, people can interview really well, but there is so much detail within real estate that people don't realize, and the consumer wants to know. So yeah.
Yeah, there seems like so many moving parts that many consumers would be forgiven if they just thought it was just like eBay. Oh, throw it up on the internet and someone will buy it and that's that. But there seems to be so many moving components. And you're so well known for your marketing prowess. You know, the folks that are in and around even your new shop front, you know, speak of just the impact making you make with your branding. And you do the same thing for your properties. You make them stand out in a crowded marketplace. Tell us about what that does for the consumers. Why is marketing important?
Well, I think that's really important as well. So that's a good thing for their, like, so for example, in Sydney, domain is like the biggest driving force. And then for us in Queensland, it's realestate.com. And obviously in other states, there'd be driving forces. I'm not 100% sure. But there's also levels of marketing. So that's the other thing, is making sure that you're getting apples for apples. So for me, I do the top of the range. So it's like, why would you want to do anything else? Like, why would you want to have any opportunity to have any less amount of buyers come through and not have that competition. So I do, for example, premium for 45 days and then it drops to feature for 45 days. So it's the best marketing.
What are those?
That's like top of the page, biggest advert, rotating always to the top, getting 24, I think it's about 24 times more views than what you would be if you were just a standard listing.
So that's on realestate.com where all the buyers are going.
Correct.
You're forcing your properties by investing more of your dollars into those top positions.
Well, I actually recommend to vendors that they need to invest in selling their houses.
Oh, of course,
so I contribute to a certain degree because I do abroad.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key as well, is not just relying on realestate.com to come through.
Right.
So I do use Domain because people in Sydney and Melbourne want to see the listings as well. And I use Homely and home sales, and Facebook advertising has become a really big thing now as well.
You're smashing it on that media. I definitely wanted to ask about why the real estate agents are so slow to adopt it, because I see you dominating on that place and people commenting and you selling properties on that. But don't let me distract from that. But don't let me forget about asking you about Facebook.
Yeah, so I think it's just about like the variety, like even things like LinkedIn, Instagram, Gumtree. I'm not sure what that relates to in other states, but Gumtree here, I've had several big, like $1 million acreage properties that I've had more inquiries off Gumtree than I have off realestate.com.
Wow.
So there's so much to it, but you
Yeah.
really need to just make sure that they know what they're doing. Even within the back end of realestate.com, for example, I have a property recently that's only 1.5 acres, and the seller had been told by somebody else that they should be under acreage. But acreage to someone up here is about 20 acres or more. So you don't want to be sitting in that spot. And if you've got an agent who've got you in that spot, you're not getting inquiries and you're not figuring out why. Well, that's because you need to be a house. Because up here is a certain amount of acres before you're considered a rural. So it's just knowing all those really important things that they're educating themselves all the time to give you the best. And that's also keeping up with times. So Facebook doesn't necessarily always, as an agent, you're not going to see a direct result because they may not necessarily go from Facebook and directly come to that open house, but they'll share it with someone, then that person might come to the open house. Or going to your listings and putting up about a property video wise, I feel attracts more people as well. They're interested in what's going on, and that also is broad, so it's all over Australia. It's not just within your area, and people move within states all the time. It's not just about focusing on just that one local area.
Well, I heard a story not so long back about one of our guests on the show was talking about they bought a property accidentally. They weren't in the market. They drove to a friend's barbecue on the weekend, and there was an open house like a street away, and they stopped in and they bought that property. And what she was saying, she was one of the few people like yourself who uses Facebook well, that Facebook is like that. It's that not exactly looking for the person looking in that area, but it's you putting that property where they are, and we're all sitting there glued to our phones. So it's kind of like that property that gets advertised to the non-active buyer.
Which is actually brings me to for sale signs as well. There are so many sellers out there at the moment that are saying they don't want to have a for sale sign because it doesn't do anything, but they're so that's saying wrong, but they're wrong because there are lots of people that are on the market within an area but not on the market, so they're not looking at what's coming up. It's more if we see something, we'll go. So if they're driving past and they see, if their house ever comes for sale in this street, we'll go have a look. And then they drive past and see a for sale sign, well, they're going to know. But if you don't have a for sale sign, they might not be scrolling through all those web places, and then you miss out on that person that may have emotionally bought.
Yeah.
Especially in suburbs where houses don't come up that often. So and there's quite a few of those where properties on bigger blocks and in areas don't come up, for example, or on the golf course or on a lake or whatever. People are looking for it all the time, but they're not necessarily looking online.
So from a marketing perspective, it sounds like you're doing what you do for your buyers. You're following up to leave no stone unturned, and that's what our viewers should be looking for, an agent who does that. But similarly, you're leaving no stone unturned out in the layers of marketing out in the marketplace.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. So after we've done effective marketing, as you've described, We have a whole bunch of people come to the open house, and you mentioned competition before, so we've got kind of that going on. Tell us about how you use those buyers that are now at the open house, hopefully falling in love with the place, to negotiate well, especially from the perspective that you've been in those shoes and you've bought properties well by buying through maybe less than effective negotiators, by buying at the lowest price. How do you take advantage of that knowledge that you've got as a buyer and a consumer to extract top price in your negotiations?
I think that it really starts with, I'll always say to someone, like, regardless of what the price is, put your offer on paper and I will go to the sellers. I think the first part is really getting the buyer to commit. Don't worry about what the price is at that point. I wouldn't even have that conversation. Just get them to commit to the emotional side of buying the property. Then you can worry about the price.
Because I just think about that. Because I bought a bunch of properties, when I do that, I haven't just put in an offer. I've said to that agent, through my words, I'll raise my family here.
Yeah, you've committed to the process. Even if it's an investment, you're committing to it.
Yeah.
And I feel you're more likely to negotiate on your price than if you were just to do that whole verbal thing, or what price around about or whatever. No, what do you think it's worth to you, for you and your family right now? What are you willing to put on paper? You put that on paper, and then I'm going to go to the seller and I'm going to go, what are you willing to sell this house for that you feel is a good price for you and that you feel you're coming out good? And then hopefully we can, get them both together at that price. So
and
most times it works. It's only on a rare occasion, that it doesn't. But, if you've gotten them committed, I don't actually think I've ever had anyone commit to a thing that's never actually gone across the line, to be honest. But I'm sure it does happen.
What about when you get because I've heard some of the stories of some of your sellers. I've seen them on Facebook, of all things, where clients are on there talking about the results you've got, and sometimes it's above the asking price. So that
I've got one right now, actually, where it turned into a multiple offer.
Yeah, tell us
and to
about
be
how
honest,
that
I hate
works.
multiple offers. They get so complicated, but
Right.
it's good for the seller. But it just can be quite complicated because you can't be biased to anyone. You can't tell anybody what somebody else is at the same time, and you just got to try to get the best result for the seller. And sometimes, even though your gut tells you that the first offer is the best one, you still have to do the process. So that's basically what happened. We had an offer at the first open house that was $21,000 above the asking price. And that person had already had a conversation with me. So there already had been some banter where I'd said, if you want to get the property, do a sort of first and final straight off the bat. Let's not go back and forth. Just put what you're willing to pay for it. And they'd done it with the intention of hopefully not having any competition.
And then someone else.
But somebody else then wanted to do it. And I knew that person only wanted around the asking price, but I couldn't make that call because maybe when they went to paper, it would have been different. So I had to basically sit down and say, you have to put your first and final. And that, like I said, the first buyer had already done that. So the second one had to do it and ended up being $25,000 less. So they won it anyway. Right. But you still have to go through the process because sometimes you could be wrong. That person might have been 30 and that's how you get that really good price.
Yeah,
so and the sellers are stoked. So, and it's also about vetting the buyer. So make sure, who's pre-approved, who's not pre-approved, how much are they pre-approved for, how much deposit are they contributing? I know they're personal questions, but to be honest, I've had too many fall where you don't ask the question, and if I had, it would have been a different story. So now trying to get those, go through all the time is a lot more confident if you're asking the right questions. And then you've got more information to give the seller as well, because it's not always about price. Sometimes if it's 5,000 or 10,000 different, and one you're taking a risk that has no pre-approval, so they don't even know if they can buy the house versus someone who's got a pre-approval letter and the amount is within that price, maybe you're better off in taking that rather than risking the 14 days and then having no one.
Yeah, and the sellers might, and then it's up to the sellers to decide whether they want to take the chance on the extra 5 or, we're giving them very clear and transparent, there they are.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Nice. I've had a bunch of questions from my viewers. I wanted to ask you about this, is we're seeing a whole bunch of agencies out there or little websites that allow sellers to sell it themselves for virtually no money. or agents that are even working for virtually for free.
Yeah.
In the middle, there's these hybrid sites where the sellers are asked to run the buyers, maybe do some of the negotiation or whatever, and then they do a bit of the work themselves, the sellers, for a reduced fee, sometimes not very much reduced, but for these hybrid DIY sales sites. And then at the far end of the spectrum, agents that seem like they're going to charge a small arm and a leg fortune for their services, and everywhere in between.
Yep.
What advice would you give our viewers on value for money and ensuring that they're getting maximum value, I suppose, for the services, no matter what they choose and no matter who they're engaging in transacting a property?
I think, again, it comes back to looking at the list to sell. So what's that list to sell? And also what they're selling them for. So again, like whether they are selling them for that list price or above or below, I think that's also key. Firstly, that's the first thing that they should be looking at.
Okay, so results,
and a lot of those,
track record.
Exactly, because a lot of those, let's say, cheaper agents, they have a purpose. No offense, but they're for people that want a cheap service. You know what I mean? Like you're not really that. You can't really believe that someone's going to charge you $5,000 for commission and give you the highest price for your house. It's just not the intention of the lower commission. The lower commission is about commodity. It's about many, many, many listings because they've got to pump through, 4 or 5 more to make the same amount of money. So they're not putting in the same effort. They don't care what happens in the negotiation. They just want to get you sold. That's the end of the bottom line.
So what difference are you seeing if in end price, say an average $400,000, $500,000 home?
It can be even upwards of $20,000 to $50,000, and
Wow.
and I've had circumstances where people have had, say, prior to me, I'm not going to mention real estate's names, but let's say a cheap brand, and they've been with them for like 6 months and haven't been able to sell at actually a lower price than what I would say. So it's totally the opposite. They didn't buy the listing; they tried to sell it for nothing, and they couldn't even do that.
Wow.
So then coming along. And then saying that we're going to put up there, like, well, how would that work? Which I can understand, not by much. Sometimes it might just be how it's priced. So offers over versus a price coming down can make a big difference as well on how it's seen by, perception by buyers, and also how you're talking within that. And I've had buyers go, oh, I didn't even realize I've actually seen this property. But you changed the photos and you did this, and I really like it this time, or how I've talked to them about it.
Right. So
and then in the
matters.
end, it matters. It makes a big
differential.
difference. As soon as someone says to me, "Oh, I've been on the market for 6 months. Can you come and have a look? We can't figure it out why." I can pretty much go through the house and within a few minutes and go, "Okay, firstly, the photos. I'll go through what it is, or the way that it's styled within those photos. It's the way it's priced. You're in a different price bracket. So if you'd marketed it this way in the beginning, you probably would have got more people here. If you get more people here, you get more competition. If you get more competition, you're likely to get an offer. So it's not really rocket science, but it is. Yeah, it's like some people just don't get it. So yeah, it can be the big difference in selling your own home. Unless you come from a sales background, like I've got a friend at the moment trying to sell me Isogenics, and he's hopeless. I'm like, dude, don't ever give up being a teacher, because he doesn't have a clue. It's the same as selling a house. Like really, they think it's so easy, but what do you really have as credentials to actually do that? And I can tell you now that majority of buyers, even when I was just selling my own house, did not want to deal with me because I was the owner. Buyers don't want to talk to the person that's selling their house. It's awkward. They don't want to have that negotiation with you. They feel awkward. You don't want to buy feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, I reckon
you
that's
want them
'cause
to be
Aussies-
comfortable.
I reckon that's because Aussies are traditionally not culturally good negotiators. So I reckon that's why. We'll happily negotiate with a real estate agent because we kind of get that, and frankly
Yeah.
the reputation most agents have isn't very good anyway, so they're happy to do it. But when it comes to negotiating direct with the consumer, we're not good at it as Aussies. So I wonder if that's part of it, that we know we're not good, so we don't want to do it.
But also, like, if a buyer's walking around and you're the seller, right? How can you really be honest? Like, if you're walking around with an agent and the seller's not around, you're going, oh, I don't like that, or why did they do that for, or this doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean you don't like the house, but you're making your genuine comments that you feel free to say.
Yeah.
If you're with the seller, you're not going to say that, so you can't have those conversations, and then you can't really be honest with them, like, because you feel like you're going to hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
But when it's delivered to an agent, and an agent tactfully, brings that up, it's that you've got that middle person that really is really important in the whole transaction.
Yeah, love it. And it sounds like, I love the way you describe even properties that are unsold by other agents. Like Sarah, the sales whisperer, can come in and tell us why and then fix it. I love it. So how would you summarize best for our guys out there who are kind of, we're seeing in the southern states, in recent times, there's been booms that have flattened out. and many people are predicting drops. In Queensland, we've been quite steady. We didn't see a giant boom, but are we not going to see a drop? In Perth, we're seeing blood on the streets. Like, with the uncertainty of the Australian real estate market, as someone who's in the trenches, what's your advice? And I know that you can't give proper advice without understanding circumstances, but overall, what's your advice for people out there considering the real estate market, either buying or selling?
In Queensland or just in general?
I suppose in Queensland, because that's where you live, breathe, work and invest,
I guess there's lots of information that you can Google now, like to really find out what's going on. But also, you can also contact almost any real estate agent and just ask them advice. But I don't know if this is really right to say on camera, but in my opinion, I don't think that we're in any trouble. I think if anything, we're going to be going up because Sydney has been so much higher, and everyone's trying to come up here, and we're like almost half the price, I think.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to move just a little bit. Maybe we won't be as expensive as Sydney, but I think there is some movement. Obviously, that's going to depend on... There's always different suburbs with different things, and there's been suburbs that have been named that are booming. I mean, keep your eye out in the news. Even sometimes I find out from the news and I go, oh, really? I didn't know that. Because it's not necessarily where I am focusing and selling, but it's interesting because I maybe want to buy it with my super, or I want to buy it as an investment, and then I'll look into it a little bit more. But also financial advisors are really, really good for that, because they're always developing and looking at, and that's the other thing, look at where there's lots of infrastructure going in. Because when there's infrastructure going in, there's usually going to be an up, the prices are going to go up.
Can I get your take, because you're an expert in this and I'm an amateur, right? I mean, I've bought maybe 10 properties in my life, and bought and sold a couple, and but that's kind of been my deal. So not very as experienced as yourself. I've had this little tactic, and I want to run it by you. I've found suburbs, like in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, where we are now. There'd be a suburb like Chermside, and there'd be McDowell, and there'd be Alderley, and there'd be a suburb in the middle, Stafford, that has got just a bit of a stigma attached to it, but it's surrounded by suburbs with higher prices and more prestige. That I'll buy the one with the stigma, and almost without fail, within a couple of years, that stigma is pulled up by the surrounding high areas. Now, it seems to me like common sense, but that's been my strategy, and every time I've kind of won. I don't know, what's your take on properties and suburbs in particular that, for whatever reason, be it housing commission or whatever, has some stigma attached to it?
I think that works for the most part, but then there are some that you've just got to be careful. Like, I'm not going to name...
might stick around.
Yeah, I'm not going to name some of it, but there are definitely some in the Logan area that have been that way. They're always going to be that way. The prices... You can pretty much look it up, though. Look at what someone paid for a house 10 years ago and what they're paying for it now. If it's pretty much similar, you know that stigma's not going anywhere.
But is it poised then for that growth? Because surely stigma goes away. Like, I look at the place where I never bought there, and I still... Well, I'll kick myself if you tell me that what I predicted was going to happen has happened. That I look at Brisbane, and I look at the Gold Coast, and I look at this underpriced area called Beenleigh right in the middle of it, and I think, no brainer.
I agree. I 100% agree. Even Eagleby, I think Eagleby has already seen such a significant growth.
So
even in the last year, I am kicking myself. I am absolutely kicking myself, because we could have purchased a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom property for about $280, and I can't even get a 3-bedroom under $300 at the moment. So again, there's been huge growth in that area, and even Beenleigh as well. Like, what you were getting houses between the $250 and $300, they're almost non-existent.
Wow.
So it's already there, but people aren't noticing it because they've come in small increments, but it's definitely happening.
Yeah,
so,
okay. I'm going to get on your VIP buyers list, so you just give me the good ones. So very cool, Sarah. Thanks so much for catching up. I appreciate it. We got to guys, avail yourself of a copy of Sarah's book. There's the link for it. Grab a copy of that. It contains a lot of the insights of a lifetime of doing this. So Sarah, I just thank you for that, catching up and lending your brain to some of my primitive strategies.
Hopefully I've helped someone.
Definitely. Thanks, me and Sarah.
No worries.
And until next time. So guys, do avail yourself of Sarah's resources. Grab a copy of her book there. Get into her world, because she'll certainly add some insights. And as she said, no matter where you are around the country, she's there for you to even help, even if you're nowhere near her market area. So avail yourself of that very valuable resource. And until next time on Real Estate Experts, I'm Glenn Twiddle. Bye for now.